I did not notice the border at first. It was not drawn in light or shadow, not announced by trumpets or thunder. It came as breath, one long inhalation from somewhere beyond my comprehension, and suddenly, the air inside my lungs did not belong to the earth alone. It shimmered. It hummed. It carried weight and weightlessness in equal measure, like the quiet before a new creation. I stood still, afraid to move too quickly, as if motion might break the fragile seam between worlds. The dust beneath my feet lifted in slow spirals, golden in the half-light, rising as if it remembered it was once a star. That was the first paradox, the ground longing to ascend while the heavens stooped low enough to meet it. I had spent years looking up for revelation, but now heaven was breathing downward, threading itself through matter, whispering to the molecules of my skin. You are not exile, you are intersection. I could feel the truth of it vibrating in my bones, ancient and new at once. The same spirit that hovered over the waters in Genesis was hovering here, within me, not as a visitor, but as oxygen. The line between divine and dust blurred until there was only pulse, only presence, only the rhythm of something infinite, borrowing the lungs of something finite. For a moment, I thought I might dissolve into light, but the breath held me, gentle, deliberate, as if to say, you were meant to stay. Heaven does not erase the earth. It fulfills it. I closed my eyes, and behind the darkness, galaxies unfolded. They did not expand outward, but inward, collapsing toward the heart. Each star was a prayer that had never found language, now igniting as it returned to its source. The breath moved deeper, past the threshold of thought, past memory, into a silence that felt alive. It was not emptiness, it was beginning. I realized that creation was still happening, still exhaling itself into form, and that somehow, impossibly, I was part of its continuation. My heartbeat synchronized with something vast, and the rhythm became a bridge, the inhale of heaven, the exhale of earth. Every living thing was breathing the same exchange. The trees swayed in the same pulse. The oceans inhaled, the mountains exhaled. Even the stones had a slow respiration that could be heard if you listened with the soul instead of the ear. I had crossed into a territory where time felt porous. The past was not behind me. It shimmered alongside me like heat on horizon. The future was not ahead. It waited, already breathing, patient as dawn. In that breath, I sensed every life intertwined, a cosmic choir singing without sound, each particle a note in a chord too wide for comprehension. The veil between seen and unseen thinned until I could almost hear the footfall of eternity moving through dust. The light around me deepened into color I had no name for, a hue between gold and sorrow, between violet and forgiveness. It moved through me like memory returning home. My skin became transparent to its glow. I could see within my hands the flicker of the divine pulse. It was not metaphor, it was anatomy. God was not hovering above creation, he was circulating through it. And I, this brief arrangement of dust and breath, was both container and conduit. I tried to speak, but language cracked under the pressure of that reality. Words were too narrow to hold a universe. All I could manage was a single whisper, I see you. And even that felt backwards, because it was not I who saw. It was light seeing through me. The ground trembled, not with fear, but recognition. Something vast was remembering itself in something small. I realized then that this was what incarnation meant. Not God disguising himself as man, but God revealing that there was never a border between heaven and earth to begin with. Only misunderstanding, only forgetfulness. The breath between worlds had never stopped. We had simply forgotten how to listen. It began as a tremor in the silence, a subtle quiver under the ribs, then widened into a weather the body could not name. Light gathering like thunder with no sound, dust lifting as if called by an ancient vow. The air thickened into radiance until breathing felt like drinking dawn, and every inhale carried more of heaven than my frame could hold. I thought I would burst, but the breath turned and taught me its rhythm. The way oceans learn the moon, the way deserts learn to wait for rain. Then the seam between worlds tore, not with violence, but with awe. And I stood inside a storm made of mercy, where particles of earth spun like galaxies, and galaxies fell as softly as ash, each spark a syllable of a language I had always known but never spoken. My name unraveled into light, not erased, but translated, and with it all the small signatures I had etched on the world. Arguments sharpened to look like truth, loyalties dressed as love, but stitched with fear. Each thread loosened, not to shame, but to free. In that unmaking, I glimpsed the scaffolding beneath everything. Forgiveness like steel beams hidden in the walls of existence. Patience like the slow mortar between moments. Hope like a quiet architect drawing plans in the margins of failure. Wind moved through me without moving the air, a motion of meaning rather than weather. And I felt the breath himself, ancient and inexhaustible, circulate through the corridors of my being, as if he were inspecting a temple he had never abandoned. Here, the storm seemed to say without saying, touching the room where I stored my refusals, and the dust in that room rose and danced like confessed secrets. Here, it gestured again, brushing the lintels of my inherited fears, and the wood remembered it was once a tree that knew how to drink light. The storm did not punish, it positioned. It aligned what had drifted out of true, the way a master tunes a piano by listening for the hidden note inside the wrong one. I watched as the smallest grief I had hidden under polite sentences opened like a burnt seed and showed a green I did not know it kept. I watched as an old anger turned transparent, revealing beneath it a love that had been trying to speak for years. I watched as my desire for control dissolved into a reverence that could finally kneel. The sky inside me flashed, not lightning, but recognition, and for a breathless instant, I saw the world as the angels must. Every face luminous with unfinished creation, every failure halfway to becoming a door. Time bowed its head, the past loosened its claim, the future unclenched its fist, and the present widened until it felt like an ocean. I could walk on if I did not look down. I did not float away. I was not dissolved. I was more embodied than flesh, more grounded than stone, as if gravity had found its true center in a love that holds planets and promises with the same gentle insistence. I wanted to speak gratitude the size of a star, but the storm lifted my silence like an offering and called it enough. Then came the turn, the sacrament of return. The radiance that had whirled like 1,000 wings began to fold, not withdrawing, but concentrating, gathering itself the way a tide gathers into a single wave before it kisses shore. The dust settled slowly, not falling, but landing, the way a prayer lands when it is finally trusted. What remained was a clarity so tender it felt new, though I recognized it as the oldest truth. Heaven does not visit Earth like a tourist, it inhabits it. The breath between worlds is not a bridge to cross once, but a life to be lived. I stood in that aftermath as in the hush after a great choir, ears ringing with a music I would keep hearing in doorknobs and dishwater and the pauses between strangers' sentences. I looked at my hands and saw not glory to display, but workmanship to continue, as if the storm had left tools in my palms. Gentleness heavy enough to change a room, courage light enough to float into hard words, attention sharp enough to cut through noise without wounding. I understood that the miracle would be measured not in visions remembered, but in kindness that outlasts mood. That evening would ask me to carry the breath into traffic, into hunger, into the unnoticed places where God prefers to be found. The border had moved, or rather, I had learned to see that it was everywhere, running through bread and breath and brokenness like a bright seam. I knew the storm would come again when needed, but I would not live waiting for weather. I would live learning the wind that stays. And as the last sparks of dust settled into the lines of my fingerprints, I sensed the next invitation arriving like a soft tide against shore. To walk the city as a meeting point of worlds, to become more porous than prudent, to let what I had been given pass through me without keeping score. The breath was steady now, quiet as consent, and I realized I had reached the threshold of the final lesson, the art of carrying heaven so gently that even the earth feels respected. Then I turned toward the ordinary, with a heart that had learned how to be extraordinary by becoming simple. Night returned, but it was no longer dark. The stars did not seem far anymore. They were close, pulsing softly in rhythm with my breath, as if the sky had moved inward. I sat beneath them, no longer trying to interpret their distance or decipher their meanings. They did not demand understanding. They simply existed, burning quietly. And for the first time, I understood that holiness does not always need to speak. Sometimes, it just needs to be seen. I inhaled, and the breath wasn't mine. It was borrowed, shared, infinite. It moved through me and beyond me, into the trees, the soil, the unseen roots of the earth. I could feel the entire world breathing with me, the mountains exhaling into valleys, the rivers drawing in the sky, even the dust beneath my feet whispering tiny hallelujahs. The veil between the sacred and the mundane was gone. Everything had become communion. The air shimmered faintly, as if remembering its creator. Every particle seemed to hum with its original song. I closed my eyes and felt the weight of my body merge with the weightlessness of light. The two were not opposites. They were lovers reunited. Heaven was no longer above me. It was within me and around me and beneath me. The realization did not explode. It unfolded, like dawn blooming in slow motion. I saw how everything holds its twin. Silence hidden inside sound, rest concealed within movement, eternity pulsing beneath time. Even death, that old horizon I had feared, now appeared not as an ending, but as another inhale. The breath between worlds had no boundary. It only changed shape. I thought of Christ, bending to write in the dust. His words never recorded, because they were never meant to be read. They were meant to be breathed. Every miracle began with breath. The first Adam awakening, the prophet speaking, the dry bones rising. Breath was the original language of God, and somehow I had begun to speak it again. Not in syllables, but in surrender. Each inhale was a prayer, each exhale a benediction. I did not need to ascend to reach him. He was descending with every breath I allowed to be honest. And honesty, I realized, is the narrow gate through which all glory enters. I felt the soft pulse of my heartbeat echo across something vaster than veins. It was as though heaven's own rhythm had slipped into my chest. Every throb said, "You belong to both. Dust and divinity. Fragile and eternal. Finite and infinite. Dancing to the same pulse." The thought was too large for language, and yet it was gentle enough to live inside my skin. Around me, the wind slowed until the night stood perfectly still. It was not absence, it was fulfillment. The silence had become tangible, a velvet gravity that pressed everything tenderly into its rightful place. Even the smallest pebble beside me glowed faintly, proud to exist. I looked at my hands again. They were ordinary, marked by the day's work, faint traces of dust along the lines of my palms. But now I saw it clearly. Dust wasn't decay. It was memory. It remembered the hands that formed it. I raised those same hands and felt the wind curl between my fingers like a familiar friend. Heaven touched dust again, and it was enough. That contact, soft, almost imperceptible, was creation continuing. I realized there is no separation between creation and creator except in our forgetting. Every act of love, every breath of attention, every small kindness is the Spirit recreating the world through us. We are not merely witnesses of divine work, we are the work itself. Each heartbeat is a brushstroke. Each breath is Genesis beginning again. The stars above blinked like punctuation, ancient witnesses to the same truth. I wanted to thank them, to thank everything, but gratitude was no longer in action. It was the air itself. It surrounded me, held me, became me. And in that boundless quiet, I finally understood what it means to be alive, to be the meeting place of God and dust, to let eternity pass through flesh without resistance, to breathe both worlds and call it prayer. Somewhere in the unseen distance, dawn began its slow ascent, gold blooming out of blue. I stood, feeling the cool earth beneath my feet, the sky warming above, and whispered into the space between. We are still breathing. And the universe, every leaf, every grain of dust, every unseen angel, answered back in the same breath, "Yes, and so is God."